to accept the fact we were all going to be poorer. Stop asking for pay rises and carry on as you were. Well, difficult to say when you're looking at some of the latest statistics. Today, we're expecting the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee to rule to raise interest rates by another 0.25% up to 4.5%, hitting mortgage holders and ultimately renters as well. We also know latest forecasts showing from the NIESR that the poorest UK households are going to be around £4,000 a year worse off at the current time. And also we look at new stats suggesting that a third of employers are likely to make redundancies over the next year. Well, let's talk about all of that with Justin Urquhart-Stewart. He's an economist and chairman of Regional Investment Platform. Good morning to you once again, Justin.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I mean, where's the good news, Justin?
Well, the good news is inflation is coming down. The trouble is it's still quite high. If you look at the US, they've seen really quite a dramatic drop of inflation. Oil prices come down, even some of the food prices have been coming down, but they're relatively isolated. They can look after themselves. You look at the EU, the figures there are coming down, but you've got to be careful with the EU because it's an agglomeration of all these different countries and economies. So you've got inflation in Malta of about 4% or so, but then you get to Lithuania and you've got well over 10%. So that range, where do you actually put your rates if you're in the EU? And the answer is somewhere in the middle, but it's a bit of a guess. And we've got the same thing here. We've got an issue whereby the economy is almost flatlining at the moment. We are seeing some growth, but what's interesting, you hear this from investors, corporate investors putting new money in, have confidence as yet to say, yes, it's going to get better, so we'll invest now, we'll invest sometime, but it won't be now.
10.1%, 10.4%, back to 10.1%. Yay, well done. Predicted to go down this month. But one of the reasons why we're expecting the interest rate rise is today, not just because of what's been happening Federal Reserve in America, but it's also because inflation is pretty much 1% higher, percentage point higher, so roughly 10% higher than the Bank of England had expected. I thought it would be in the 9-point-something% range, and it's refusing so far to go down. I know we get those figures fairly soon from the Office for National Statistics, but this pledge is due to halve inflation. Predictions, the Office Budget Responsibility, we could be looking at 2 or 3% inflation by the end of the year. It's just not looking very promising right now.
Well, also it's very difficult to actually measure, because what is inflation? Well, it varies according to how old you are. At my age, I spend more money on drugs, not for fun. These are the ones you actually need.
And red braces. Basically, that is an expensive hobby.
They have gone up a lot, I have to admit. That's their purpose, after all, to hold things up. But anyway, the point is that actually having you've actually got areas like oil coming down really quite dramatically. But also, I look around the economy overall, it does vary enormously. So this is we're really arguing over some really pretty variable information.
Well, but that's one of the key things for the poorest households, isn't it? Because we're told now inflation is 10.1% on the latest month's figures, but actually for the poorest households, it's way higher than that. Because they're pretty much spending all their income on the necessities, and those are the things that have gone up by far more. And even, basic foodstuffs, actually the most basic food has gone up by, 30, 40, 50%, whereas, more luxury goods haven't gone by up at the same sort of percentage, and they're, people have got a bit of spare cash to afford that. But the poorest UK households, on average, being £4,000 a year worse off. The poorest UK households don't have £4,000 to be more worse off by. So presumably, these are the people who are going to the food banks. These are the people who are not paying their rent, who are not paying other bills, and who are getting, presumably, into more and more debt.
Unfortunately, this is a storm we've talked about for, 18 months now, and now it's seriously coming through. £4,000 to someone who's earning a reasonable wage, a lot of money, but we can live with that. However, to those poorest, you are never going to be anywhere near £4,000. And although we've given support and extra support, I'm afraid it is going to be a very painful time. And whilst I'm no enthusiastic for the comments from the Bank of England, albeit informally, so saying we're all getting poorer, let's be clear about it, the poorest are getting poorer. Yeah. And we need to be very careful here that we have the regulatory control from the loan sharks and light, and direct people to areas where they can get better flexibility. Things like credit unions, where they can borrow money more cheaply, more flexibly, and they're frankly more trustworthy than some of the banks you have to try and deal with.
Can I also just mentioned in the introduction there about a third of employers, this is according to a poll by ACAS, they say they're likely to make redundancies over the next year. That is a real concern, isn't it? Because even if it's like one or two, if it's that many businesses, most businesses, big, small businesses, that's an awful lot of jobs.
It's a lot of jobs. Now, it is ridiculous, isn't it? Here we are saying there's a shortage of employees, they're not going back to work. But then when they do try and get back to work, but the employers don't want them anymore.
Yeah, can I just say, everyone working from home, by the way, this is a time when presenteeism may pay off.
Yes, well, but what we need, remember, every single job is a tax contributor.
Yep.
It's our money, after all. So every job that's gone means it's going to cost the government more. So any incentive they can have to try and get people with that magic word confidence to invest in businesses, bring in new money coming in. Look, let's be clear, there is no shortage of money in Britain. What there is shortage is some clear thinking about how we invest that money. I don't mean by the government, because they're the worst people to do it, but to encourage investors, be it pension funds or even down to individuals with their pensions, directed to where it has the most benefit for people. Now, we've got lots of choices. We've mentioned before the tech hubs in this country. We've got a lot of them producing very good businesses, a lot of whom, the successful ones, probably go to America. We should be actually making sure we are the tech hub of Europe, well, frankly, the West.
Yep.
We're very good at setting up businesses. For heaven's sake, create the tax environment. Don't give money away, but the tax environment so people will get some reward for investing and also for their return.
Justin, people will be cheering you on. Justin Urquhart-Stewart, thank you very much indeed. 7:41 is the time. I mean, Alan Tolhurst, come back to you as Chief Reporter at Politics Home. There is no doubt. I mean, there's just so much concern that we are in this sort of low productivity, high inflation, high interest rates. People can't afford their mortgages, their rents. They're getting terrible public services, but taxes are sky high. It's an irritation that a lot of things don't work, but it is perhaps an indication of that something is going horribly wrong.
Yeah, it's the lack of growth, the lack of movement in the economy. The fact is that if you don't have that growth, it's very difficult then to blow away things like inflation, and therefore would allow the
grow the pie bigger.
Exactly, and therefore would allow the government, allow the Bank of England to bring those interest rates back, because obviously they have their own deleterious effect by bringing those interest rates, by using that as a lever to bring down inflation. You create other problems as well, and so that's what the government, one of their 5 priorities is this kind of stuff like bringing down inflation, but it's not really in their gift to do so. They just have to kind of fingers crossed and hope that it works, and therefore in the meantime it's been very difficult for people without a lot of those support measures that were talked about, and Anna Firth talked about them as well. A lot of them have fallen off now, that things like energy bills,
but particularly energy bill help for companies, for businesses. And I've been talking to local businesses in my area, and they would say, their energy bills are just off the scale. People are on these fixed rates.
Exactly, and they fixed them last year for 12 months when they were very, very high. They're coming off those. Yes, it's going to be lower, but even if the price cap is going to be around sort of 2,000, which sounds great in comparison where it was. It was less than 1,200 before Russia invaded Ukraine.
But this is the key thing. Even if inflation rates do come down, it's not all going back to where it was.
No, it's not going to be 2% or whatever.
This is where we are.